D&D 5.5 changed goblinoids to the Fey creature type. At first it seemed okay, but then we started thinking about it. It just felt off with regards to hobgoblins. We asked ourselves, what is a Fey after all? The moment we put our finger on it, we realized orcs fit that mold so much better than hobgoblins do. Hobgoblins shouldn't be Fey. Orcs should. Welcome to Monster Week. It's an annual community event created and organized by Jenny D and Pointy Hat to bring together TTRPG creators on YouTube. This year's theme is the Fae. Hi, I'm Travis, one of the developers of a new science fantasy TTRPG that finally lets you answer the question, when a Fae asks you for your name, are they after your soul or your login credentials? So, goblins and hobgoblins have been part of D&D since it was first released in 1974. And for 50 years, they were humanoids or goblinoids. Then, when Wizards of the Coast released D&D 5.5, all of a sudden, they're reclassified as Fae. This isn't just simple semantics. D&D is fundamentally a game of categories, so this matters. Hold person and charm person don't work on them anymore. You need hold monster or charm monster now. Those are 4th level spells. It's not all debuff though. Protection from evil and good now does work against them. So at least there's some attempt to balance out the spell effects. Mechanically, this is probably fine, but it just seems off narratively. To figure out if this makes any sense or not, we have to start from the idea of what does it actually mean to be a Fae? The simplest way to define this is to say that Fae are creatures that originate from the Feywild. That's both arbitrary and circular. It doesn't get us anywhere. You could get a little more descriptive and say that Fae are magical humanoids. This is too broad because not all Fae creatures fit the humanoid body type, like blink dogs, giant rams, and grinning cats. Fae are best defined as embodiments of primal, but not elemental, forces. They are nature, emotion, story, and symbolism, all contained in flesh. Redcaps are spite and murderous intent wearing boots. Dryads are the souls of trees. Sprites are miniature forces of cruelty and curiosity. Hags are the essence of hunger, manipulation, rot, and inevitability. Fae aren't just magical people. They are magic masquerading as people. If that's our working definition of Fae, hobgoblins feel a lot more like a Roman centurion. Why is that? So in European folklore, goblins and hobgoblins were essentially the same creature, with just different motivations. Both were household spirits. Goblins were mean and spiteful. Hobgoblins were playful and mischievous. This is probably why D&D has always tied them to the same creature type, with hobgoblins serving as goblins' bigger, meaner cousin. It's also a decent rationale for the change in 5.5e, but D&D hobgoblins bear essentially no relationship to the hobgoblins of folklore other than their name. We'll come back to that. Orcs have had a similar history of change within the D&D structure. They've been around just as long as hobgoblins have, and they've also served as evil humanoid monsters that PCs could slay with impunity. Over time, because reasons, they've morphed into a standard PC species. There's a bunch of fuss about this, partly because it's kind of a drastic change. It got us thinking though, if we're shuffling lore and monsters around already, why not try to make a change that enhances the narrative? So why don't hobgoblins fit as Fae? The first clue is alignment. Lots of people decry the alignment system because of how it was used in the past as a way to force players to run their characters in a certain way. But that doesn't mean it's useless. especially for monsters in the monster manual. There, it gives the game master a concise indicator of how a given monster will behave in an encounter. Within the core rules of D&D, there are only two lawfully aligned fae: blink dogs, and hobgoblins. If you include the expanded rules, this goes up to a handful, but none of those really come across as truly lawful. It just doesn't fit the fae type. The only fae creatures in a Wizards of the Coast product that really scream lawful are hobgoblins. They're militaristic, expansionist, and collectivist. If you've got one specific monster in a monster family that doesn't fit the mold of the other 100 plus creatures in the fae category, you should at least consider that it's been miscategorized. In the interest of being fair, let's see if we can defend the new classification, even though we disagree with it. Modern D&D places the origin of the goblinoids in the Feywild, and hobgoblins represent the courtly side of this origin, focusing on social hierarchy, duty, individual honor. Not all fae are whimsical. The unseelie courts can be brutal and cruel. Including the hobgoblins within the ranks of the fae allows the Feywild to have a militaristic and expansionist side that wouldn't exist otherwise. Lastly, and from a meta perspective, whatever that's worth, making hobgoblins fae differentiates them from other PC species and keeps them from simply being red-skinned, angry humans. The core argument here is that hobgoblins represent what happens when fae creatures trade poetry and symbolism for a rank structure and logistics. Here's the problem. Hobgoblins, as a species, just don't behave like other fae. Fae society is notoriously filled with obscure, arcane, and confusing rules. Those rules are based on symbolism, narrative structure, and taboo. The rules that govern Hobgoblin society are intensely practical and utilitarian. Hobgoblins are expected to control the area around them and understand that to control a larger area requires more of them. Their every action advances the will and needs of the tribe, not the individual. Interactions with fae are always some kind of a negotiation, or at least almost always. And negotiations happen from a position of strength. When a fae negotiates with you, that strength is based on obfuscation. They get to take your name because they hid the fact that you were in a position to lose it. If a hobgoblin wants to take something from you, they do it at the end of bloody steel. If the fae are symbolically expressions of story, taboo, and nature, hobgoblins function as an expression of the expansionist drive of civilization and conquest. Civilization is the domain of humanoids. Fae simply couldn't be bothered. So if you remove hobgoblins from the fae lineup, it does leave this gap. We believe that with a very slight shift of focus, orcs fill that gap more neatly than hobgoblins ever could. For all the hullabaloo about the place orcs occupy in the D&D world, I've not heard anyone take the approach of going back to defining principles about what an orc actually is. People argue about the political meaning of orcs, not their mythic nature. Orcs have always been, with a few notable exceptions, wild forces of nature. They serve Grumsh to conquer, and they conquer to serve Grumsh. This feels a lot more fae to me than a rigidly hierarchical, militaristic, empire-building species like the hobgoblins. Orcs map very neatly onto the wild hunt and territorial will aspects of the Feywild. They're much closer to redcaps than hobgoblins ever were. If being Fey means that you're a physical manifestation of nature, then orcs are the wildfire that burns without mercy. If we make this swap, we end up with this. Goblins sit in the mean and spiteful trickster's pocket. Orcs become the raw fury of the destructive side of nature. Bugbears represent the nightmare ambush predator that lurks in dark places. Hobgoblins then become humanoids because Fae are too busy being what they are to try and build an empire. You simply move a different piece than wizards chose to do, and we end up with something that feels like the Feywild. Historically accurate hobgoblins have essentially nothing in common with D&D's version of hobgoblins. D&D's hobgoblins feel too institutionalized to be Fey. They lack the inherent symbolism that characterizes that creature type. They're too mortal. Orcs, mapped to the metaphysics of the Feywild, so much better. They feel like a natural fit. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the other Monster Week videos. There's a great group of Dungeon Tubers bringing you some really cool stuff, so it's definitely worth your time. If you did enjoy this video, we hope you'll consider liking it, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell. All in all, a much better bargain than giving us your name. If you'd like to join us on Discord or download the free Altered World Quick Start, those links are down in the video description. So until next time, keep your world altered.